Good evening. Welcome to Q&A live from the Tamworth War Memorial Town Hall. I'm Tony Jones, and answering your questions tonight, the Vice President of the National Farmers Federation, Fiona Simson, the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister for Agriculture and local member for New England, Barnaby Joyce, Country Independent Tony Windsor, who held New England for many years and is now trying to win it back, Rural Businesswoman Robbie Sefton, and Labor Spokesman for Agriculture, Joel Fitzgibbon. Please welcome our panel. Thank you. And as usual, you can watch Q&A live across Australia on ABC TV or News 24 if you live outside the eastern states. And tonight, we're also streaming Q&A live via Facebook, where you can watch, you can comment, and you can ask a question. Of course, Tamworth is the home of country music, but it's also the centre of struggle to decide who should represent rural and regional Australians. Major parties like the Nationals or independents like Tony Windsor. Let's go to our first question tonight from Sandra Banbury.
I am born and bred in the New England. We have been forced to move our children back here from our home in Tara, Queensland, without us knowing a gas field had surrounded us. Over 25 gas wells within a 7-kilometre radius of our home. We have tests that show contamination of our air and our water with lead levels too high for the kids' safety. Yet even with proof, we are being ignored by government at all levels. We are tired of this nightmare. We have done everything possible to get help. My husband is a shearer and we have worked hard to get our land. What will you do to help the little people like us get the new beginnings we deserve?
Barnaby Joyce, we'll start with you.
Well, Sandra, I'm very aware of the issues that surround Tara, and I know that the fight that the people of Tara have had to try and make sure that they get treated justly. Sandra, one of the issues in 2011, we presented a Senate report that we wrote the extension of terms on to try and make sure that we dealt with this issue. Now, the extension was not written by the Greens or the Labor Party or even the Liberal Party. It was written by the National Party. And we came down with 5 key principles, noting, Sandra, that overwhelmingly this is state legislation. They're the ones who get the royalties. They're the ones who actually approve the exploration licences. But the 5 principles stated that you can't go onto primary agricultural land, you can't interfere with aquifers. If you destroy an aquifer, it's common property. Number 3, you shouldn't disturb the quiet enjoyment of the people there, and that's you, Sandra. You're living with the quiet enjoyment and you've got virtually an industrial site next to you. The next one was to make sure that if you're not doing that a fair return goes back to the community, and also that a fair return goes back to the landholder if you're not destroying primary agricultural land and you're not destroying an aquifer. Now, Sandra, it's well and good us ventilating a lot of this at a federal level. Of course, overwhelmingly, it's state laws, and if you go beyond what you're able to do at a federal level, of course, that becomes an issue where the state will just take you to the High Court and most likely win. So it's a position which we try to do our very best, but overwhelmingly it's run by the states.
I was going to quickly go back to Sandra. Are you happy with the answer?
No, of course not. That's just passing the buck. You know, it is our air. We have a basic right to clean water, and that is a national law.
Well, Sandra, I can... And Sandra, I can understand your frustration completely, but it's just a constitutional reality. There is the division of powers between federal, between state, and between local. And if we go beyond our jurisdiction, Sandra, it is just an issue for the High Court. They will just take it and repeal whatever the federal government says.
Okay, let's hear from the other panellists. Stay there, Sandra. Might come back to you. Tony Windsor.
Sandra, unfortunately, your circumstance and the circumstance of a lot of people in Queensland represents the horse bolting, in a sense, before we fully understood the scientific and social ramifications of some of these extractive activities. When I was in the federal parliament in 2013, I instigated what's called the water trigger. It won't help in your circumstance, but I think it may well help others who suffer from the same circumstance into the future. The water trigger gives the Commonwealth Government, through the Environmental Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act, some power of approval where there are mega coal mines and coal seam gas, where there are large amounts of groundwater. So there is legislation, and Mr. Joyce is not quite correct to say that the Commonwealth can't do anything, that it's all about the states. In fact, the Commonwealth can, and in certain areas of Australia there was supposed to be, including the Liverpool Plains, there was supposed to be a full bioregional assessment to assess the capacity of the landscape to absorb these impacts on groundwater systems. If that had been in place in your area a decade ago, you may not be facing the consequences that you are now.
So you're saying it's federal power that could have been used?
Since 2013, it could have been used. Prior to 2013.
Well, I'm just going to quickly go back to Barnaby Joyce. If you quick right of response to that, because if there is a federal power that could have been used, why isn't it being used?
Sure. Well, with the issues with the Liverpool Plains, I know they'll come up later on. You've got PL1, PL452 and PL456.
Can we just actually, just to put this into some sort of context, today, front page news on the Northern Daily Leader here, everyone's seen it. The gas miner Santos is planning to drill for gas on the Liverpool Plains. That must be a bit inconvenient for you during an election campaign.
Well, it's, well, I'll take that as a comment. But with PL1, that was actually, you have to actually look at how these things start. Who gave the exploration licences? Because that's the source of the problem, Sandra, in your instances and also on the Liverpool Plains. PL1 started on the 11th of December 93. That was when I was not in government here, that Mr Windsor was actually the local member then. PL452 started on the 10th of January 2007. Mr Windsor was the federal member then. And PL456 started on the 5th of March 2008. Mr Windsor was the federal member then. It's really, what we are always left with, Sandra, is trying to fix up the problems that have been left to us from the past. That doesn't mean that we have to walk away from those problems. It means we have to do our very best. And that's probably one of the reasons we brought up Minister Hunt to try and make sure with the Shenhua and BHP Karuna mines, which have not started, that we did everything in our power to bring in new conditions, and our target is to make sure that they don't start.
Okay,
and that will be the same with coal seam gas on primary agricultural land, which is most definitely the Liverpool
Sorry to
Plains.
interrupt you. We've actually got another question on this. I'll just quickly go back, if I can, to Sandra. Just a final response, listening to the discussion between the two gentlemen, who both, it appears, are to blame for various aspects of this.
Well, neither have given me an answer. Basically, they're not saying they're going to do anything to help the little people. You know, well, I've got the proof of the contamination. I've done everything, including go see both these gentlemen previously to this. And you just get fluffed off, to put it in a polite way. And you're just not doing nothing. You know, lead's a carcinogenic, which causes cancer. There is people up there, children, living with this in their air and their rainwater, and you're sitting there telling me it's a state issue? It's not a state issue. It's a very, very serious issue right across this nation, and you just sat there and told me you're going to do nothing.
No,
Sandra, I'm just going to time.
That's not correct.
Okay, well, you can quickly respond, but we've got another similar question. So.
I understand your frustration, Sandra, I really do. But the state government is the ones who gave out the licences, and the role of the state government still is overwhelmingly the person who has authority to deal with that issue.
Barnaby,
Barnaby,
I think you've made that point. I'm going to go to our next question, which is on the similar subject, and you'll get more opportunity, and so will our other panellists. It's from Nicola Churlian.
Minister Joyce, we produce beef on the Liverpool Plains. In 2013, I met with you in Parliament House while down there on gas and coal concerns on the plains, and you were in opposition. You said to me, and I quote, "You need me, as in you, to be at the table in government. I am the only one that can protect your interest." End of quote. Since then, we have had federal approval for Shenhua Watermark. BHP is still on the table. Santos is busy in the Pilliga, and as we've just heard, it's announced today that has set out a 3-year program to explore for gas in PEL 1. And Santos has stated to the federal government in its 2014 EPBC application that this will affect the groundwater of the Gunnedah-Oxley Basin. So why should we vote for you if this is the best you can do to protect water and land into the future?
Barnaby, I'm going to put you on hold because I want to hear from our other panellists first. Fiona Simson, you also have a farm on the Liverpool Plains. Do those concerns reflect your concerns, or do you have a different view?
Absolutely they do. I mean, the whole reason that I'm sitting where I am now is because of the BHP and Shenhua mine developments in the Liverpool Plains, and the fact that I have great sympathies for Sandra and also for Nikki, because I still can't believe that we are living here in a democracy where the people have such strong feelings about this, such strong feelings about agricultural land and water, yet we still see politicians passing the buck and blaming each other. Now, I know that it's difficult when you have a situation that where you're dealing with licences from another administration, but somebody has to take responsibility at some stage. Somebody has to stand up for our land and our water. We need to look forward at our productive agricultural land, and we need to actually put in place measures to protect them. And what we're hearing tonight about that it's the state government's responsibility or it's somebody else's responsibility for actually putting those licences in place is just not good enough. In the Liverpool Plains, we've been doing this for 10 years now. We've actually been standing up and saying enough is enough. The Liverpool Plains is some of the most productive land in the whole of Australia. It has amazing underground aquifer systems. We're told consistently by politicians that we shouldn't have to be dealing with these licences and that somebody else will deal with them, but nobody ever does. So, Tony, I can totally understand the frustration in the room, and I think that this is frustration that is being felt all the way across Australia as we see some of these industries and the lack of planning that goes into where these industries operate. I mean, the whole reason that we have a planning system is to plan for the best places for agriculture, the best places for mining, the best places for schools and hospitals and all those things. Yet we have a planning system that totally disregards agricultural land when we're talking about extractive industries and gives its precedence. And the people are feeling frustrated. The people are feeling like they don't have a voice in the process.
All right, let's go to the other side of the panel. Robbie Sefton, is there a different view from business owners in Tamworth? Obviously, the mining industries do provide money for the community.
Yeah. I think it's a really good point, and I really understand where Sandra and Nicole are coming from. Small business is really critical to rural and regional Australia, and the wealth and the jobs that mining brings must certainly be considered. So, and you look at small communities and you look at the difference that those jobs make to them. So it is really critical. And I think that the other thing to think about is how mining and agriculture can coexist. So I know that we're talking about a subject here that isn't necessarily relevant to what I'm going to be saying, but I do know of a very good dairy farmer who's been dairy farming in the Hunter Valley for over 16 years, and he's been coexisting with a mining company. So he's leased that land from that mining company. They've got an underground mine that's happening right there for them, and so they've planted trees together, they've developed irrigation systems together. So there has been an opportunity where mining and agriculture has worked really well together. So I believe that agriculture and mining does need to coexist. We do need to get really clear about who is responsible for making the decisions, how those decisions are being made. I think that I've done a little bit of research on this, and I understand that New South Wales government, with the new government that we've got now, has really tried very hard to clean up its processes and the way that the transparency, how decisions are being made. So it may not be perfect, but I think we're certainly getting there. And I do believe that there needs to be an opportunity for agriculture and mining to coexist.
All right, let's hear from Joel Fitzgibbon. What's Labor's position on this, and on both fronts, I guess, mining of coal and agricultural land, but also CSG gas?
Well, Tony, I've said on this program, I think on a number of occasions now, that I believe all coal and CSG projects should be dealt with on their merits. And there'll be some which will bring that economic benefit that Robbie was speaking about, and there will be those with whom the impact on the environment or on our agricultural sector make the risk too great, and one would expect that the closer they are to prime agricultural land, for example, the more likely they are to be approved. I certainly hope that is the case. But if it is true that Sandra has scientifically backed evidence that water is being contaminated, for example, that should be it. Because we're not only talking about an approvals process, we're talking a process or approvals which have conditions attached to them. And I just don't understand how contamination could be taking place without anyone taking action. And if that is happening, it should not be happening. Now, it's all right for people to say it's a state issue, and predominantly it is. But I heard Barnaby hopping into the local government amalgamation issue in New South Wales pretty heavily. That's definitely a state government issue. But, you know, if you're a leader in the community, you've got to speak up for your community, whether it's a local government issue, a state government issue, or a federal government issue. And we all need to have a view on these things locally. I certainly have a view on these issues in my own electorate, and I state them very, very clearly. Recently, I've been fighting a flying fox infestation. I know many of you are familiar with that problem. It's a state government issue, but as a community leader, I've been out there saying something's wrong and we need to fix this. And Barnaby, it's just not good enough for you to pass the buck to the state government. You are the Deputy Prime Minister of this country, and you have to have a voice, mate.
Okay. Sorry, Barnaby, Joyce, you do need to respond to that. And can I put it this way? If it were in your power to stop these projects on the Liverpool Plains, would you do so?
I've said quite clearly, and I've said the same since 2009, that you shouldn't have mining on primary agricultural land. I've made my task to do whatever is within my power to assist. And if we just look at the facts, of course Joel would say that because it was the Labor Party that gave out the mining leases on the Liverpool Plains. So it's pretty cute, I'd have to say, Joel, to have that position. But there is no mine at Chenoir, and there is no final approval for a mine at Chenoir. There is no mine at BHP Karuna, and there is no final approval for a mine at BHP Karuna. There's only one major mine in the area, and that's at Werris Creek. And I talk to the people and have this week, as recently as this week, with the concerns they have of what's been happening to their water table and what's been happening to their capacity to irrigate. And I take that on board, and we're using all that information to try and make sure that we continue to provide it in such a way as to bring to a final conclusion the issues that are pertinent to the Liverpool Plains, so that we don't have what appears to be happening around the mine at Werris Creek happening around other parts of the Liverpool Plains.
Now, I'm just going to go back to our questioner because she had a hand up there. Go ahead.
A couple of points. One is regarding coexistence. 3 million hectares, 96% of landholders across this region, so the size of Tasmania, on survey said they did not want more coal mines or coal seam gas, and they did not want and did not think that agriculture could coexist with those industries. The other point is, Minister Joyce,
you have to keep it quick because you're in the zone of making comments now. So make a quick one, and we'll let the panellists talk.
How come the federal government stopped sand mining on Fraser Island under Section 51 of the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Australia Constitution Act? You can stop mining. You do have that power, and we're waiting for you to do it.
Barnaby, a short answer. And can I put this to you? Is the problem you face that your Environment Minister Greg Hunt approved the Chenoir project and you're bound by Cabinet solidarity once he's done that?
No, Tony, the problem is if we had gone any further than where we went, we would have been trotted off to the High Court, and they would have said quite clearly, you have gone beyond the realm of where the federal government has authority to the realm where states have. Okay. If we have a problem with the Constitution, I know that at first blush people say you can't pass the buck, but we can't get rid of the Constitution either. As much as people would like to, as much as we could have a Q&A audience talking about what we'd do to the Constitution if we were going to change it, you can't. And in other areas where there are international agreements.
Barnaby, Fiona wants to jump in and say something here. I'm just going to let her quickly do that.
So definitely there was a development on Middlehead in Sydney that was overturned by Tony Abbott. So that was a state government decision, a decision that had gone all the way through the approval process that was then overturned by the Prime Minister. So we can't have these projects, Tony, on land for 10 years plus with the uncertainty that brings for the industries and the communities that are there. We need to have an end to them.
Okay, I'm just going to quickly, Tony Windsor, when the Werris Creek mine was brought up, most of the people in this room would realise that what Barnaby just was talking about was a mine on property that you once owned. So obviously that's a nuanced way of saying you're responsible for problems on that property.
Well, that's not quite true, because there is no mine on property my family once owned. It's next door to a mine and was affected by the zone of affectation. But to go to the key issue here of the questioner, the Liverpool Plains, the issue of the groundwater, and the Liverpool Plains has the largest groundwater system in the Murray-Darling system. We're not talking about windmill water here, we're talking about massive volumes of water. It once had the largest irrigation bore in the world, so the massive volumes of water. The water trigger was put in place in 2013 because, and Barnaby Joyce is right here, because the state-based processes had failed and no one had any trust in those processes. We needed some sort of federal oversight so that there was a process that could objectively, scientifically, independently assess these landscapes as to whether they could absorb these impacts of these mega mines and coal seam gas. That water trigger is sitting there now. Minister Hunt, Minister Joyce could have been using that process through the bioregional assessment process to access. The federal government can stop those developments. It would have difficulty at Tara because the circumstances has passed in a sense. Would have difficulty at Werris Creek because the mine's been there since 1929. But there is a process that can in fact work, and it's an objective process, and both Minister Joyce and Minister Hunt have been complicit by neglect in terms of this particular issue. They can do something if they really want to. Okay. And the questioner is right. The questioner is right. The Murphy-Ors case that applied to Fraser Island, where in a sense it was passed, and this was back in the Bob Hawke days, where the Hawke government used their export powers to prevent something from happening. Now they did. The state government had approved sand mining on Fraser Island. The Commonwealth didn't have any direct power. As Barnaby would suggest in this case, it used its export powers to prohibit the export of sand, which was the intention of the company, from Australia, and that killed the mine.
Okay.
Those sorts of things can be done.
Thank you very much. We're watching Q&A. Live from the country music capital of Australia, the next question comes from David Doherty.
Question for Mr Windsor. Why would you ask the voters of New England to oust a Deputy Prime Minister, the Leader of the Nationals, to somebody who sold to the coal mines, didn't contest the last election, could be enjoying retirement, and would appear on face value as contesting the seat, perhaps purely on spite?
Tony Windsor.
Well, I think you just got a bit of an understanding that I don't operate on spite. There are a number of issues that I'm very concerned about as a country person, and I have been watching for the last few years some of these issues slip by where we are being asked to accept a lower standard. The National Broadband Network. Why has Armidale got it? Why has Armidale got it? Why hasn't Tamworth got it and other communities? Why haven't they? I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. Tamworth was supposed to be rolled out in September 2013. Nothing has happened. Nothing has happened since then. The Gonski education reforms.
Okay, I'm just going to make one point. You can't make a stump speech here, so wind it up pretty quickly.
Why should country kids accept second value, second standard, second-class standards? What are we doing about climate change? We live in an agricultural area. We're going to depend on the climate forever. If we don't start addressing some of these issues of the future, we will be the victims. Look at renewable energy. Look at the sustainability issues that we're talking about on the
Okay, we're going to get to a lot of these issues during the show, so I'm going to move on. Barnaby Joyce, do you believe your opponent here is acting out of spite? That was the question.
Well, all I know is that I'll run my race and I'll do the very best job I can for the New England. I'm happy, even when you talk about climate change, the largest wind farm in New South Wales will be in Glenann. It's a $400 million project, and we've turned the first sod on that since I've been the member. I was happy that when I came home after having to go away to Queensland to work, before I went to Queensland, I actually lived in Werris Creek, 31 Gordon Street, Werris Creek to be precise. And all these issues that we had to fight for instance, Chaffey Dam was underfunded, unapproved and unbuilt. We've got it complete. We've got other things we're fighting for right now to get APVMA with 195 jobs into Armidale so we can get more jobs out into country areas. To stand behind the work that we've done as a government, because you've got to work as a government. Record cattle prices, record meat sheep prices, turning around the agricultural economy so that agricultural exports now are the second biggest exports after iron ore. And I'm sure that that's something that underpins the economy, not only of the New England, but also in assisting our nation to try and turn around the financial predicament, to be honest, that we were left by the Green Labor Independent Alliance. And we have to continue to work to do that.
Okay, let's go to our next question. It's from Margaret Evans.
My question's also for Tony Windsor. As an independent, Tony, what assurance can you give the electorate that you will remain independent, that you will vote on each issue with regard to the wishes of the electorate, and that you will not align with any particular party?
Brief answer.
Well, thank you, Margaret. I've given an undertaking that I won't side with either side of Parliament. If there is a hung Parliament, I think you're suggesting. I don't think there will be. But if there is, I won't be signing any document with either side. And that could have happened last time as well. The piece of paper, in terms of a hung Parliament, is not worth the paper it's written on. There is no legal standing in terms of that piece of paper. And in the last hung Parliament, the only thing the piece of paper had was that the supported supply when the budget was being presented. On all other issues, and including the right for a no confidence motion, it was an open book.
So, very brief answer to this one, but are you saying there won't be a hung Parliament because people learnt from the last one not to allow that to happen again?
I think it's quite likely there could be a hung Parliament, but what I'm saying is that I won't be supporting one side or the other. I'll be independent of both.
Okay, let's go to our next question. It's from Mark Rodder.
I'd like to preface my question by saying that I'm a father of 6 young kids, and one of them has a chronic illness, which will shine a bit of light on the reason why I asked this question. I'm from a family that has historically voted for decades for Conservatives, and I voted for the Liberal Nationals since I've been able to vote in the 1987 federal election. But I've become disillusioned over a number of issues, including, but not limited to, the unfettered sale of Australian land to foreign corporations, proposed cuts to Medicare funding, proposed deregulation of tertiary fees, putting a degree out of reach of Aussie kids, many Aussie kids, and the precious few benefits of the free trade agreements. What do you say to me and many other Australians who have lost faith in the major parties and might be considering voting for minor parties and independents?
Let's hear from our non-politicians first. Fiona, do you sort of see this shift away from the major parties in this region? Because it's, we've seen from the news poll today that 15% of people are voting for other. You add the Greens, it's 25% voting for the non-major parties, according to the poll.
Well, certainly, I don't think it's just in this region, but right across Australia, when you walk around and talk to the people of regional Australia, there are huge issues out there that people want and expect and need to be addressed by their politicians. And I think what people are wanting are commitments to the sustainability of regional Australia. And they want policy that is actually driven not just by the National Party, but by all parties. Agricultural industry and regional people, we feel, are getting less and less, but we need a bigger voice. Each time there's a redistribution, we end up with less politicians in Parliament and more in the cities. So it's really important to people in rural and regional Australia that the people who represent them actually stand up for issues like health and education and all the issues that are so important to rural and regional people. We want to make sure, and agriculture is such a part of that fabric of rural and regional regional Australia. And we believe at the moment there's a huge potential in front of us, but we need the government to actually commit, and not just commit on sort of knee-jerk election promises, but to commit the sort of intergenerational investment that we've seen from our forefathers. And that's the sort of stuff that I think makes regional Australia great. And that's the sort of thing that people are looking for. And I think people should continue to look for that. And I take my hat off to anybody who stands for representation in Australia, whether they're from a major party, whether they're an independent or whoever they are. And I'd certainly be doing my members a great disservice if I didn't try and talk to all the sides of politics to make sure that we had the best outcomes for rural and regional Australia. I think that's what people are looking for.
Let me go to Robbie Sefton.
I totally support what Fiona's saying. And the one thing that I'm very aware of is that when I run my business, which is a communication consulting business, or the farm that I run with my husband, the one thing I'm very aware of is how much money have I got to play with? What can I do? What's the scope of the opportunity that I can create? How can I grow my business? How can we be more productive on our farm? And it keeps coming back to what's the strategic intention, or what's our vision, and then what's our budget. So what I'm very aware of is that we need to see our decision makers in our politicians actually working within the budgets that they've got, and also being courageous as leaders and really demonstrating and walking the talk, and particularly for rural and regional Australia. Infrastructure is really critical. We need to get that NBN rolled out. That is so important.
We'll come to that. I'll go back to our questioner. Where's our questioner? I'll get our questioner to stand up again. Thanks very much. Can I just ask, were you a member of a political party at one point and then you gave that away? What happened?
Yeah, 2 years ago. I was a little disgusted in the support of electricity privatisation, and I was concerned about the effects that that agenda would have on the small communities of rural New South Wales, and I felt that I had to take a stand and leave it.
Okay, thanks very much. State government issue, I guess. Joel Fitzgibbon.
Well, I think, Tony, people are walking away from conservatism with a capital C. And most members of the National Party, for example, would describe themselves as conservative, and I don't mean that as a criticism. But we live in a rapidly changing world, and the true meaning of conservatism, of course, is to be against change. People who don't like change. And in a rapidly changing world, you do need political leaders that can adapt to change and respond to the changes that we face. That's one of the reasons I'm a member of the Labor Party. We are a more progressive party, trying to adapt and keep up with change, but still adhering to our basic principles. That is to grow the economy, to as best as we can share the wealth amongst its people, to give a hand up to those who are struggling, to protect people at work, to make sure the system is fair. Now, agriculture is a good example of that. The climate is changing. I know there's a debate about what might be causing it, but the climate is changing. And our focus if we're going to have a productivity agenda, we have to focus on that changing climate and work out ways to produce good quality food in similar volumes, despite those depleting resources. It requires a new approach. Conservatives just want to do things the old way. We look to do things new ways. But I think the electorate generally, whether they're going to Donald Trump or Jeremy Corbyn in the UK, or dare I say Nick Xenophon, they're looking for someone who's prepared to do something a little different. Now, I suppose we do that a little bit more slowly because you've got to take people with you, and you do have to account for the other side of the equations. Coal seam gas is a good example. Coal mining, jobs, and its contribution to the economy. We want to grab that if we can, but not in a way that damages our environment. So we take, if you like, a more conservative approach to the progressive approach. But you've got to move with the times, and governments that don't move with changing times get left behind, and I think that's what's happening in the electorate at the moment.
Let's hear from Tony Windsor, and then I've got to go to Barnaby Joyce on this. But so what are you, conservative, progressive? Where do you stand in this spectrum?
Well, I think I'm an independent. Always have been. Always have been. But I identify with what Mark is saying. There's definitely a shift on. There is disillusionment with our political system, with both of the major parties, because about a dozen or 15 years ago, the two parties virtually became management teams when all of the issues of the worker versus the boss went out the door in terms of philosophies. So there's a search for other political representatives. No doubt about that. John Howard says it could be up to 40% in terms of people that are on the move, shifting their vote. And this is one of the reasons, because of this lack of trust that's developed within the community. This is one of the reasons that I'm campaigning on the back of the need for some sort of standing commission into corruption at the federal level. We need something that can keep an eye on the activities of the political parties and those who provide the money to the major parties and anybody else for that matter. And we need that scrutiny to be part of the re-establishment of trust within our political system.
Okay, Barnaby, Joyce, obviously it's a problem for the major parties if there's a big defection to independence of various kinds. You saw it in the news poll, 15% voting other, 10% Green, 25% not interested in the Coles and Woolworths of Australian politics.
Well, I can understand, and I'll take that as a comment. It's same old, same old. The issue, of course, is if you believe that independents are the perfect source, then we would have a government of 150 independents. This, of course, would promote chaos. Who would be the Prime Minister? Who would be the Treasurer? What is the actual purpose of policy? How do we actually move in a direction on key issues such as defence? And I understand the frustrations that Mark Rodder has, but we've got to try and make sure that we have the capacity to govern the nation. And on the issue of trust, and I heard Mr Windsor talk about trust, the reality is that the Governor-General will ask, do you have the numbers to govern? And if not, it'll be tested immediately on the floor in a vote of no confidence. And if you're going to state the item of trust, and there's one question you must answer, and that is, which side would you support? If you can't answer which side would you support, then how do the voters trust that they're going to get the government that they voted for?
Yeah, you can't answer that, can you?
I can.
Okay, go ahead. Quick one, very quick.
I can answer that quite easily. What would happen in the circumstance where my vote actually made the difference? Two things could happen. The Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, could call another election, or the Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, could assume the Treasury benches, as Julia Gillard could have back in 2010. And Barnaby's right, until there is a vote of no confidence, that Prime Minister would stay in place. Now, I have never supported a vote of no confidence in a leader in 20-odd years in Parliament, and I don't think any of the other independents have either. So the Prime Minister, in this case Malcolm Turnbull, would be there until some sort of maladministration or corrupt act occurred. There was no confidence motion in the 2010-2013 Parliament. The opposition leader, Mr Abbott, never moved it.
Okay.
Never moved it.
All right, let's move on to some policy issues. Our next question comes from Jane Kibble.
As one of many rural Australians that suffer from a serious life-threatening condition, I've had to travel to Sydney for 2 years now at a substantial cost to my family and to my work. And I wonder, when it's a matter of life and death, why do rural Australians have to accept a lesser treatment? And I realise this will be thrown over to the states, but when you're looking death in the eye and it's not blinking, whether or not it's a state or a federal matter becomes irrelevant to me.
Fiona, start with you.
Rural and regional Australians shouldn't have to accept a lesser standard for anything, and I strongly believe that.
Fiona, do you believe that they are having to accept it, though? I mean, is it the fact? Because we've got a huge number of questions from people struggling to get care in different places, having to go to Newcastle or Sydney for treatment for various illnesses.
Yep, look, anecdotally from my own personal experience and others that I talk to, absolutely, unfortunately, the services that we have in the bush, particularly in relation to health, are not the same standard as they are in the city, and people are having to go to the city for treatment. The trouble, I think, is that when you start talking about why this is so and how it happens, we get the same. It's all about regional and rural sustainability. How do we actually get these services to the bush? And we're told that we don't have the populations. We're told that the population is moving to the cities, and that everybody must prepare for the move for the populations to the city. And meantime, we're losing populations, we're losing services, and unless we have the services, it's sort of a chicken and egg thing. Unless you have the services, you don't have the people. Unless you have the people, you don't have the services. But I look back and I go out to some of the towns in really remote New South Wales, towns like Lake Cargelligo. You can go out to Lake Cargelligo, you can stand on railway tracks in Lake Cargelligo that were built in 1923. And at Lake Cargelligo in 1923, not only did they have a passenger service, but they also had a freight service. Now there's hardly any trains at all that go out there, and I don't think the tracks have probably been mended since 1923. So how can we actually ever hope to see the services back in rural and regional New South Wales? There was no population then, so the whole population argument doesn't really apply. How can we actually get the services back in rural and regional New South Wales and Australia unless we demand it of our leaders and we actually ask for their strategies and we ask for their policies and we make sure they deliver on policies so that rural and regional people don't have to accept a lesser standard?
I'll come back to you in a minute, Barnaby. I'm sure you want to answer that, but let's hear from Robbie Sefton as well.
Again, I support what Fiona's saying. I've had the opportunity of being born and bred in the bush, and like many young kids, educated in the bush and then moved to the city for a job. And I wanted to come back because I really wanted to make a difference to rural and regional Australia, and I wanted to build a vital and dynamic and prosperous business, both as the farm and my consulting business. And so I really believe that we as rural and regional Australians need to be really self-determining. If we want to go out and have a go, then we go out and do that. And I think that that's what the backbone of rural and regional Australia is: hard work, commitment and good leadership. But what we need to support that is, of course, very, very important and very good infrastructure. So health is absolutely critical, and where we're moving to as a society is we're having a digital transformation, and what's going to be really critical is very, very fast data. So if we've got very fast data, that means that we will have exceptionally good health services because we can have those experts that are based in urban environments that they can actually communicate via the fast data and actually have experts sitting at this end as well. So, and the same goes for education. So where we're heading as a society globally is in this digital revolution. It's already here. And without that very fast upload and download, then we really don't have much of a future. And I'm not just talking about rural and regional Australia, I'm talking about the whole of Australia. We need to get up to speed, we need to get there quickly, and we need to do it with integrity.
Okay.
And we also need
Robbie,
to
I'm going to interrupt you because you've jumped ahead of a question that we have on that subject. I'm going to go, and we'll come back to it, obviously. We're going to go back to Elizabeth Wakeford.
What about Jane Kibble?
I live with my family on a small farm just 20 kilometres out of Tamworth. My friends joke that it's the equivalent of, or the telecommunications equivalent of the third world, because we don't get TV reception, we don't have mobile reception, we have a damaged fixed line that we can't use, so we don't have a fixed line available. And we are forced to use satellite internet, which on a bad day means we can't actually access Gmail accounts. And I find that astounding because we're not very far from a major centre. But we are, as Robbie was saying, in the midst of a digital age, and our future is going to depend on the quality of our telecommunications infrastructure. And I'm very mindful that health would benefit enormously in rural areas from that infrastructure. But we just don't have it. And I watch the hype around Skymaster and all of these wonderful new things, but it seems to be just short-term solutions, ad hoc solutions, and I would really like us to be able to commit properly to a fibre to the premises comprehensive NBN, and I
Okay.
think that would benefit everybody.
Let's hear from our politicians. Joel Fitzgibbon first.
Tony, we are already one of the most urbanised countries in the world. And if we don't deliver services, whether they be telecommunications or health services or education services, we'll all be living in the capital cities. And that will be such a disaster for all sorts of obvious reasons. And the question is, who's going to grow our food, for example? So I don't have time to address both, but telecommunications is all important. And of course, I support Labor's fibre to the premise NBN. But on health, I'll tell you why you can't blame the states. We have this terrible thing in Australia, one of the wonders of our federation, vertical fiscal imbalance. It means the Commonwealth raises most of the money, but the states deliver most of the services. And the fact is that the states are broke and they need help to fund their health systems. That's why Kevin Rudd moved in and acknowledged that and made a guarantee that he'd fund 60% of their public health needs so that they weren't deteriorating everywhere, but in particular in the bush. And that's the debate we're having at the moment. Malcolm Turnbull is cutting that additional funding we gave to health, and I can assure you we'll be having a little bit more to say about that prior to July 2.
Barnaby, Joyce.
Wow. Look, I'd first like to give Jane the dignity of an answer as well. Jane, just in the last fortnight, I announced an extra $25 million to assist in an oncology unit to be built at Dubbo. We asked for Labor to match our funding. They didn't. So we are always trying to make sure that we push services out with the states. They're building a new hospital in Armidale, a new hospital in Varel. We have a new hospital in Tamworth. We acknowledge the work that has to be done there. Jane, I don't ever think we will have exactly the same services as the CBD of Sydney. It would just be not the truth to say that we are going to be able to deliver that service to every regional section of Australia. We have to try and always do things within our means to repay the debt that we have, and that unfortunately is the raw rule of economics, trying to do as much as we can to make sure we run a tight ship. The other question is about the broadband network, and if I can just address that. The best way to try and test what the public wants is to see what they buy. A fibre to the premises, and you're correct, it can produce 1,000 megabits, a gigabit service, and that's an incredible service. And the problem we've got is the NBN has not sold one of those services, not one. In fact, for those wanting over 100 gigabits to domestic, there's only 48 that have been sold. Overwhelmingly, it's the 25 megabit service that's got 52% of the sales for where the NBN is available. So we have to try and make sure it meets the market, and that's how it works. Now, if we just go through what, so that people understand, with satellite, you'll get 25 megabit down and 5 megabit up. And I know that that's not the best service. I understand that. That's why it's for the remotest areas. But if you wanted Netflix, that's about 5 meg.
Okay,
that's
sorry.
5.
You got to give the question.
5 meg.
You can't yell out. Sorry about that.
Well, they can.
We can go back to our questioner to respond to that. Well, just hang on a sec. Let's go back. Well, Barnaby.
If I just finish off this, if we go to the Labor Party program of fibre to the premises, it's an extra $30,000 million, $30 billion, an extra 6 to 8 years to roll it out.
Okay, Barnaby, let's go back to Elizabeth, because you've heard her story. She's given you a story about her experience with the satellite. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's a bit of a slip to say that, well, we do 25 megabytes is fine for us, but it's yeah, there's a great disparity there. But my point, I actually was going to say, it's not about what we're using now, it's about our future. So I've got 2 kids, and I know that they're going to be needing much faster speeds and much more data into the future for the opportunities that they need for education and health. I think it would have enormous potential to cover the gaps in services that we experience in rural areas.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Let's hear from Tony Windsor on this.
Do it once, do it right, and do it with fibre. This is the infrastructure of this century. It delivers to our kids. It delivers in terms of our health. It delivers in terms of education and business. It is the infrastructure. It isn't about cost. It never has been about cost. It has always been about politics, because one side decided to go for the top standard, the other side had to oppose it. And that's one of the great tragedies of this issue.
Fiona, I'd just like to hear you on that. There is obviously a connection being made between the NBN, between health and the future. So your view as the Deputy President of the National Farmers Federation.
Digital technology opens up the scope for people who are remote, for whom the tyranny of distance is an inhibitor. And whether it's health, whether it's education, whether it's a business, and just because you're remote, Barnaby, you still need more than 25 gigs. I think the School of the Air, I think the download is about 25 megabytes. Yep, so I think we need to get all those sorts of things in perspective. Just because we're remote, sometimes we're running businesses, we're running School of the Air, all those things require huge downloads, and it's a real opportunity to actually level the opportunities that people have in rural and remote areas.
Okay, sorry to interrupt you there. We've got quite a few different questions to get through. Let's go to Rachel Sowden. Thank you, Rachel.
Good evening. Youth mental health services in the bush are hard to access and very patchy. Earlier this year, we had an acute need that saw one of our children hospitalised. The closest teen mental health inpatient service is at John Hunter Hospital, a 5-hour drive from my house, 4 hours from Tamworth Hospital. And it's actually really hard, even on suicide watch, to get into for people that are not in the local area. And what commitment will you give all of the politicians to supporting mental health for teens?
Okay, let's start with Joel Fitzgibbon.
Thanks, Rachel. This in many ways takes us back to the last question, because Barnaby may be right. We may never have the services that they enjoy in the capital cities, but he may also be wrong. And if he is proven wrong, it will be because of the digital revolution. The digital revolution can bridge the divide between city and country. And that may also be true in mental health. Who knows what sort of teleconferencing systems might take place to help people in need. But I've experienced this. In fact, I had a problem in Merriwar, which will now be in the electorate of New England, where I had similar complaints. And of course, this is run out of New England Health, Hunter New England Health, and you always get the response, you know, and it seems a reasonable response. They explain to me that they do this and they do that, and there shouldn't be a problem. And it's hard to keep pressing unless you have a sort of weight of evidence that it's a systemic problem. So
does Labor have any ironclad commitment to increase the services, to increase the funding to mental health, and particularly, as in this case, to youth mental health?
Yeah, well, the services are delivered through the states, and that's not a buck parking exercise.
It sounds like it is, because just a moment ago you were saying you can't blame the states for things like this.
No, but we're talking about the delivery of the services. Now, we're talking about the delivery of service. You can't always assume the delivery of the service is faulty because
you can actually
of
tie
funding
funds.
issues.
You can tie funds for the delivery of service for mental health if you're a federal government, surely.
Yeah, of course you can.
And are you going to?
Well, I'm not sure, Tony. Okay. I don't know of any imminent announcement. Well, I'm not going to make it up. There may be an announcement forthcoming on mental health. Right. I'm not aware, but we are conscious of the problem.
Should there be? Would you press your colleagues to do it?
Well, I don't believe you can spend too much money on mental health.
Tony Windsor, they were asked to hear from the politicians. Go ahead. Well, you're a former politician anyway.
This is a classic example where we really have difficulty in the country of getting specialist services. And I don't think there's anyone necessarily that you can actually blame for that. But we've got to create some incentives for people. And I agree with Joel, the first part of Joel's answer, that if we can get the NBN right and we can give these people the capacity to link with others and enjoy the country lifestyle at the same time, we have the capacity to attract these people to the country. But there are a lot of specialist services where there are legitimate problems in actually attracting them to stay here, and hence, in this case, children have to move to where those specialist services are.
Barnaby, Joyce, can I just quickly make this point? And it's about funding again. Funding for mental health services to this electorate in the 2015 budget were cut. You've explained that it was one-off funding. What happened to it? Will it come back?
Well, Tony, what we had is within our drought package and also part of the agricultural white paper, to put money aside for mental health. We nominated it as one-off. We always try to be straight with people. So when it's one-off, it is one-off. But we do have further funding that is coming through now. And it'll start on the 1st of July. We've got $360 million that'll go to the primary health network that'll roll out over the forward estimates. And within that, it has the capacity for those who've worked in that space before to get access to that and to be the deliveries of that outcome, of that mental health outcome. We understand completely the work that's required in such areas as headspace and trying to make sure that we give people that first point of call, that front line in mental health assistance. Throughout, over the forward estimates, the money that we'll spend on hospitals will go up to $95 billion. That's up by 22.7% over the forward estimate. So we are actually investing more money in the public health system, even within public hospitals as well. There is so much more that we always wish to do, and there's so many questions that are asked in this audience tonight that's asked about, and they want money to do it. Anything that requires money requires us to fund it, whether it's taking money from that group over there to give it to this group, or this group here to give it back to that group. The government doesn't actually have money. It's a door which money passes through to deliver all the things you want. And that's why, even though it might sound boring and mundane, we have to make sure we get the economic management of this nation right. Because without it, we just turn into suggestion boxes and complaints tables, but not the capacity to actually pay for it and deliver it. And I want to make sure that we've got a nation that's strong enough to deliver the outcomes that you ask for.
So just a quick question, reflecting on what Fiona said earlier. Was the old country party in the past a lot tougher in terms of getting services allocated to the bush than you are in this kind of coalition?
No, I don't think so at all, Tony. I mean, I look at what we are delivering in so many areas, in water infrastructure. Went up and we started Rookwood Weir, $130 million on the table for that. The oncology unit at Dubbo, which the Labor Party didn't support us on. We put $25 million on the table for that. Even today in Tamworth, we put money on the table to start creating a stronger. Well, we asked whether you were going to match it, and you said you weren't. So
that's a low.
Well, that's the truth.
Barnaby, that's ridiculous.
Can I quickly, while we've got a little pause there.
These.
All right, sorry. I'm just going to go back to our questioner.
But one of the key issues there is.
Sorry, Barnaby. Rachel, our questioner, just wanted to get back involved. So if you wouldn't mind.
Absolutely. I understand that there's always money and there's always different competing needs, but like Jane said, and we're talking life and death here. My child was on suicide watch. Jane has had a very serious illness. And you're saying that the money is the problem, and I understand that money is an issue, but when you're talking about people in regional and rural areas dying at a greater rate, why isn't there the money there?
Well, that's to show proper respect to your answer, is to make sure we make the money that is available there. The first thing we have to do is make sure we make the economy available to deliver the money. But we are doing it. We're putting $360 million on the table. It starts rolling out on the 1st of July. It's part of the primary health network. And within that...
Barnaby, we're now... Sorry,
this is really important.
Keep it brief, because we're now repeating ourselves.
Within that mental health space is the money that we put on the table for the 10 psychologist sessions to try and make sure that we can deal with these issues and make sure we deliver the services. But my responsibility to you is to get myself in the position has the greatest capacity to grab hold of the treasurer and to drive these agendas for you. I've got to sometimes eat humble pie and make sure I get myself into that position, and I can't just sit on the edges and talk about every issue but not be able to deliver on any. I've got to get as close to the centre of the circle for you.
Tony, isn't this also about building stronger regions? How are we going to build stronger regions? We don't want to be on the receiving end of some money that we have to put our hands out for with our begging bowls. I mean, I'm a big believer in regional Australia. I'm a big believer in the power of regional Australia and the power for us to have our jobs and have our growth. It's not just about mining jobs. It's about agriculture. It's about, we want to hear the plan from our representatives as to how they are building stronger regions to ensure that we can generate our own wealth.
Sorry to interrupt you, we're nearly out of time. I'm going to go to a question which is a key aspect of the government's economic plans from Joyce Segbor. Jai.
Mr Shorten and Mr Turnbull have both acknowledged they support a company tax cut for small businesses. Mr Turnbull is proposing that this applies to medium and larger businesses up to a turnover of 10 million. As a local business owner who employs 20 people, this will save me around $8,000 per annum. May not sound much, but it will enable me to put staff back on a Sunday where I'd previously cut back. I would like to ask Mr Joyce and Mr Windsor, other than this company tax cut, what do you propose to do about the 8.8% unemployment in the New England region, which is the highest in the state?
Okay, just before we go to that, I'm going to just hear from Robbie Sefton. You also run a business here in Tamworth. Let's hear from you on the issue of the company tax cut, the first part of the question.
I really support the company tax cut. I think it's a really good idea. What I'd also like to see is some other opportunities where there are incentives for people to bring their businesses to rural and regional Australia, and that there are other types of tax cuts for those businesses. So I think that there is an opportunity for that company tax, but I'd like to see that expanded. But I'd also like to see some skin in the game by the small business putting something back. So I'm a true believer, if you are going to be asking the government to do something for us, then we should be able to look at what we're going to contribute back as well. So I do believe that. So I like the grant scheme. I think grants are very good, $1 for dollar. So I'd like to see the government doing more of that, as well as possibly a company reduction in the tax.
Joel Fitzgibbon, that business will employ an extra person. So the questioner says, because of the company tax cut.
And we are backing the company tax rate up to a turnover of $2 million. We've set our... No, I'm getting there. We would love to do more, but we're saying our priorities are different. Health and education, skills training, etc., support for struggling families. Now, Malcolm Turnbull can't even tell us what his tax cuts will cost over 10 years. So there's a big black hole. It's a bit hard to support something or measure something when the Prime Minister himself can't give you that number. But what would I do for small business? Let's go back to the NBN again. It's empowering for business. Let's go back to the labour that you need, skills training, vocational education and training. We've got to turn around these cuts to funding in those areas, and of course infrastructure is very, very important. So, you know, we're very supportive of all of those things, and in fact we're fighting for all of those things, but we just don't think the budget is under stress. We've got to make decisions about where we spend. At the moment, we don't believe a tax cut for bigger businesses is the priority for the country.
Barnaby, Joyce.
Well, I don't believe that bigger businesses anymore are defined by a 2 million turnover, and what we're doing is at the first stage as we try to roll out further tax cuts for you. There are other tax cuts that are in there. The write-off of plant up to $20,000, 100% write-off, and that's very important. Making sure that within the economy we build the vital infrastructure, water infrastructure, dams. We've got the inland rail. We put $594 million on the table for that to create a corridor of commerce from Melbourne up to Brisbane through the inland to connect people in regional areas to that population base and to the markets that are outside that. That'll allow the ARTC to construct around about $2 billion worth of that vital piece of infrastructure. On top of that, further money for roads recovery, further upgrade of the New England Highway, vital pieces of infrastructure such as Tenterfield Bypass, such as Bolivia Hill realignment, Scone Bypass, further upgrades all the way through that we're going to keep on driving forward. In the apprenticeships area, making sure that we get people who are out of work back into work by allowing them to, for you to basically be their tutor, their guide in getting their first job, and assisting you in that process by giving you the cash and also supporting the wage to get these people started. This is all part of a plan of how we actually drive it. Underneath all that, making sure that our economy is strong. record cattle prices, record meat sheep prices, making sure that we get the benefits of the
Barney, I hate to sort of wind you up, but
it's such a great plan.
We're just I think you've told us you have told us a great deal of the plan. We've got time for one last question. This one's from
the other candidate. What is his plan? My question was about.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you're not the moderator. I am. We're going to a final question over here. Thank you very much.
Nice try, Joy.
I'd like to ask the panel, how do you see realistically breaking through the wall between the city and the bush? The almost total lack of genuine comprehension of the importance of the bush to the city is growing, and it's to the nation's detriment, and reality does bite eventually.
Fiona.
Yeah.
Time for an answer from everybody, and then we're going to wrap up.
Absolutely. Look, I totally agree. We do need to make sure that we keep connecting, and a lot of the things that we've talked about tonight are actually going to help make some of those connections. If we can actually try and ensure that we have incentives in place to build sustainable businesses in rural and regional Australia, to support the people, as Robbie said earlier, there are so many people in rural and regional Australia who are having a good go, but they do need to be supported by sustainable and strategic government policy that supports infrastructure, it supports roads and rail and port and airports, it supports good funding and some incentives around health and education. And I think we don't want to just accept that the new population and the population is going to go to the coast. So much of the planning seems to be about how can we build bigger cities? How can we cope for the population going to the coast? But there's not enough planning about how can we actually incentivise the industry in rural and regional Australia? How can we give it security? And things like the very first topic tonight, the mining and CSG, for example, that puts a whole cloud of uncertainty over really valuable agricultural regions that stops investment and sterilises investment in those regions while we wait to see what happens with the mining and CSG licences. So we certainly need certainty. All industries need certainty. And I think we really need to have some plans to put forward around how we can actually guarantee the growth and sustainability of regional and rural New South Wales and Australia. And for national farmers, we think that agriculture is that industry. Agriculture is one of the few industries actually that has the potential to actually double by 2030. It's quite phenomenal what is available at the moment in agriculture. And when we're talking jobs and growth, that is the industry that has that potential if we can actually garner some policy support.
Okay, Robbie.
I want to change the conversation that's had about rural and regional and remote Australia. I want to say it's a great place to live and a fantastic place to work, and it is. And I think we all need to be more positive about what we stand for here, and we need to have that conversation with everyone that we talk to. Whenever we're in the city, we should be talking about what we do and what a vibrant and vital and refreshing life we live out here and how healthy we actually are. So I find the conversation tonight has been quite negative. It's not my experience of living and working in rural and regional Australia. I love living out here, and so does my team, so does my family, and I think it's a remarkable place to bring up children, and it is a very healthy and happy environment that you can actually have an economically viable future, and the traffic's great. It's a great place you can spin the wheels, do some donuts in the driveway and have a great life. So I think...
We just find that a little hard to imagine, Robbie.
I think there's a bit of a rev head in every kid from the bush. So it is a really brilliant and wonderful place to bring up children, and it is a very sustainable environment. What we need to be is more cohesive. We need to be more connected, and we need to share the joy of our food and fibre with our urban cousins, and we need to understand our urban cousins more as well. It's not just a one-way street. It has to be two-way, and we need to demonstrate leadership. We need to ask our politicians to be responsible and accountable for what they're doing. They need to balance the books. We cannot live on the never-never, and we all have to give something up. When things aren't travelling well, we all know that. We can't have everything. As Australians, I want us to stop asking the politicians to start giving us stuff all the time. What about us to become more responsible about who we are in our communities and what we stand for, and what are we giving back?
We're starting to run over time, and I will hear from the politicians. Keep it brief if you can, John. How do you realistically break through the wall between the city and the bush?
Well, just for brevity, I'll just agree with everything both Fiona and Robbie has said. Absolutely.
Too scared not to.
Would dare not. I just want to zero in on one thing Robbie mentioned, that is the food connection. Increasingly, I believe that young people, children, in the capital cities are losing the connection with food. I doubt many of them would be able to tell you what agriculture means. It's a word that they're not all that familiar with. And I think we need to build that bridge and to raise that awareness. You know, don't jump on me, Barnaby, but for 5 minutes I was thinking about changing the name of the Department of Agriculture to the Department of Food and Fibre. So they're better to describe what we do. We produce things to eat or to manufacture. I think a small thing like that might actually help build that bridge, but it's probably a little bit of a dangerous play for me at this point.
Was that another way of getting into fibre to the home?
It was
let's hear from.
It's one of those. But I just make the point. We need to educate people in the capital cities about where their food comes from, who grows their food, who produces their food, who manufactures their food. It seems like a simple thing, but we are losing it.
Okay, Tony Windsor.
There hasn't been a parliament since Federation where a country member of that parliament hasn't held the balance of power. What we're talking about here, and I agree with Robbie, but what we're talking about here is political clout. Not abusing that clout, but using it much more strategically. Country people tend not to do that. They tend to be loyal to one side of politics, and they're taken for granted by both. Have a look at the way in which our system works. The mention of parties wasn't in our constitution at all. The first 20 years of federation, there was only one majority parliament, only one. We've got to look at the way we use our democracy to advantage country people, not disadvantage city people, but get our fair share.
Okay, and Barnaby, Joyce, we're over time, so you get the last word.
Well, the whole point of the National Party was to only look after regional people. We don't represent urban seats, we only look after regional seats. To join the National Party means that you'll never be the Prime Minister, because we don't want to be. All we want to be is that point of leverage all the time, so that every day we get the opportunity to work with the Prime Minister to not only bring a better outcome for regional people, but to have a strong nation. I believe that regional people absolutely want the very best outcome for them, but they want a strong nation as well. They do not want to put the whole nation at risk for a parochial purpose. And we all the time I drive, like we've got Fiona Nash as Minister for Regional Communications, Regional Health, Regional Development. I take on agriculture and water resources to get the dams built. Indigenous affairs. Aboriginals are so important to the way we look after our people. Now, we're never perfect all the time, but we do our very, very best.
Well, I'm afraid that's all we have time for tonight, so please thank our panel, Fiona, Simson, Barnaby, Joyce, Tony Windsor, Robbie Sefton and Joel Fitzgibbon. Thank you very much. And a very special thanks to the people of Tamworth, to the Town Hall and to this great audience. Thank you very much. Now, if you'll just hang on for a minute, next Monday Q&A will be broadcast live from Penrith in Western Sydney with the opposition leader Bill Shorten. Last year he was written off as a man who'd never make it, but now he's within striking distance of government. Could he win on July 2nd? Next Monday on Q&A you'll have the chance to test the man who wants to lead the nation. And by the way, we see reports today the Prime Minister is looking for a national debate that's live and interactive with questions from Australian citizens and social media. If only such a thing existed. Prime Minister, Q&A is ready when you are. Until next week, good night.